Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over a colder pattern which is going to be taking over parts of the eastern United States as well as a little bit of snow into the northern Rockies. In the beginning part of the video we're going to be talking about the fall foliage over the United States as well. We are going to look at a few states' current peak foliage report. So we're going to look at Minnesota, Maine, and New York because those are the only three states I could find the foliage reports for. Because it still is a little bit early. I would assume that probably past the 20th is when most states are going to start putting out, especially in the northern half of the U.S. That's when they'll start putting out the fall foliage reports. But right now we only have three states that I could find that have their reports out. So we're going to be looking at that and much more in today's video, so make sure you are staying tuned all the way until the end. Here's a look at the current National Weather Service page. As you can see, we have some red flag warnings in effect for parts of the Northwest and the Northern Rockies. We have some wind advisories also up for parts of the Northwest as well. And then we have a few flood watches scattered throughout California, Washington, as well as another area in and around Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi, and one more area around the central Gulf Coast. Other than that, we don't have many other watches or warnings currently in effect. Yesterday, we had a high temperature of 106 degrees, tied between Death Valley, California, and Rio Grande Village, Texas. Again, both of them got up to 106 degrees. Low temperature of 11 degrees, 35 miles west-southwest of Chote, Montana, as well as in Stanley, Idaho. And the highest rainfall report was in Junta, Georgia, where they got 6.9 inches of rainfall. No snowfall reports as of yesterday. So let's start talking about the fall foliage. Here is, according to the, I believe this is the Smoky Mountains website, where they put out every single year the national forecast for the fall foliage. And this year they actually did it a little bit, I think it's a lot better than what they did last year. Last year, what they did was they had kind of contiguous areas where you had the fall foliage. So, for example, instead of having these little pockets in the Smoky Mountains or in the Rockies where you see the higher amounts of fall foliage, they kind of just had one big strip where you had that color. So they did make it a lot more detailed for this year, which is something that I do like, and they are making it more detailed every single year. It's county by county, so of course they're not going to be too it's not going to be too localized, but it's the best you can do, especially on a national scale, to get it this accurate. And it is actually fairly accurate when you look at it. Here would be for September 20th, so I'll write that in the bottom left corner. This is for September 20th, and we're looking at, for that time frame, quite a bit of leaves changing over the United States. It looks like much of the Rockies will already be undergoing at least some amount of patchy or partial color changes in those areas, especially in some parts of the central and northern Rockies, high up in elevation. We're already nearing the peak time for the fall foliage. Also up into the Great Lakes and the Northern Plains, we could be looking at fall foliage peaking around next week, or potentially around the 26th, the 27th is when it'll peak over a more of a widespread area. And then also for the Smoky Mountains, if you want to get some of the fall foliage in, I would say the next 2 weeks is your best shot. I would say after the 27th, if you live in the southern or central Appalachians and you want to catch some good fall foliage pictures. And then if you live in the Northeast, I would say wait another week or two, and you'll get it over a much more widespread area. If you do want to make the trek up into northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire, or central and northern New York, you could still see some fall foliage even in the next couple of days. So we're definitely getting off to a rather active start in terms of the fall foliage. And let's see if that's going to continue over the next couple of weeks. If we look at a couple of the individual states, starting off with Minnesota, they put out their fall foliage report. This is as of September 17th. So yesterday is when this was released. You can see that a good portion of the state is seeing at least some change in the colors, and that would be for the areas that are to the north and to the south of the Minneapolis metro. Of course, in and around Minneapolis, because of the urban effects, it's going to make make it a little bit warmer, and you also don't have as much tree cover into that area. But once you get further south and further north of there, and even further west of there, you will start to get some of that color change a little bit earlier than within the city itself. You also have that within parts of northeastern Minnesota around Duluth, or as you get up into northwestern Minnesota, potentially some areas already seeing semi fairly active amounts of fall foliage. So we're actually dealing with 25 to 50% color foliage over those areas. So fairly decent for this time of year. Again, we're not at the peak right now, but I would say in the next 2 weeks we'll start to be much closer to the peak. By early October, it will be pretty much peak fall foliage for Minnesota. If we look at Maine, you can see that they're looking at mainly just the northern part of the state. So up near Caribou is where you're dealing with in kind of areas 7 and 6 on this map. That's when we're dealing with most of the peak fall foliage right now, 10 to 30%, so still a low amount, but you are seeing some of it. Even though in these regions down here, you're not dealing with anything really being highlighted. If you go up into the higher elevations of central Maine, which you do have some west of Bangor and also south of Millicott, you do have some higher elevations, and if you were to go up into those areas, you would probably see a little bit of changing colors, especially around the tops of those mountains. But again, you're probably going to want to wait a little bit longer, a few more days to get some of the fall foliage to really be present. And this was as of the 15th. So this was made a couple days ago. Not completely up to date, but it's the most recent one that they have. If we look at New York, you can see that we do have a decent amount of fall foliage cover over this area. It's still at a low amount, even in parts of the Catskills, Adirondacks, as you get up near Lake Ontario. You are still dealing with a low amount of fall foliage, but it is starting to change. But if you were to look at for a majority of New York, it is still with no change in the tree colors. You're probably going to have to wait probably a week or two more to get it more widespread over upstate New York. And if you live downstate, you're probably still going to have to wait, I would say, into early October to start getting some of the decent or noticeable leaf changes in those areas. Let's start talking about the temperature pattern, which is why you guys probably clicked on this video. We're going to be seeing that this trough, which is over the northwest and the Pacific coast, that is going to be moving out into the eastern United States. So we're going to be dealing with this entire trough feature moving on further to the east. It's going to push this high pressure out of the way, and that'll eventually move out into the Atlantic. And then this trough, again, in the western United States, is going to be bringing in some cooler temperatures. So we could see maybe some of that fall foliage being enhanced a little bit earlier into these areas. You're dealing with the colder temperatures coming right when the peak is supposed to hit. So we're looking at around the 24th, I would say 23rd to probably after the 23rd is when you'll start to see the cooler temperatures, and that will correspond with a lot of areas seeing the start of their typical fall foliage. So you can probably enhance that. You can probably enhance some of the colors. You'll probably have a little bit earlier of a fall foliage time if this were to be the case. I would say 2 or 3 days earlier for everything. So let's say your peak is October 10th, and this is just a random date. You would probably be dealing with the peak where the colors are most vibrant around October 6th or 7th. So this cooler temperature pattern should help to bring the fall foliage colors a little bit faster than what is normal. If we go on to Monday, you can see that would be this last time when the trough was over here. That was for Sunday, and so now we're into Monday. You can see that trough is digging down into the northern plains, and it'll be actually fairly cold into those areas. We're looking at about 10 degrees below normal for that day. Ahead of this trough, it'll actually be quite warm. We're dealing with a big high pressure system, especially up into Quebec as well as Atlantic Canada. So those areas are dealing with a fairly good amount of really warm temperatures. If we move this on to Wednesday, You can see that we do have some of the colder temperatures moving into the Great Lakes as well as the Tennessee Valley, and this is going to kind of continue to rotate around here. So we're going to have the trough eventually make its way right around here, and then eventually into the northeast. So it'll kind of keep the same axis point up into Ontario, but it'll start to kind of branch off and rotate around that axis point. And what we're actually going to see is that this is going to loop up back into Canada. So that looping will allow it to kind of stay over that same area. So while it's moving to the north, it's still bringing in some cooler temperatures for the Northeast, for the Ohio Valley, for the Great Lakes. So those areas, even though it's moving up to the north again, that time frame of about 7 to 10 days where it's still in the process of moving will allow some colder temperatures. The reason that's happening is because we have a big high pressure up into eastern Canada. So we're dealing with that blocking the system. It's not going to be able to go anywhere. So once it hits the northeast where that high pressure extends to, it's going to have to move back up into Ontario. It's going to look very, very awkward and weird when you look at it, but it's what's going to end up happening. So it'll be kind of interesting to look at, especially as we get closer to that event. You can see that it strengthens. So we have that high pressure blocking it off. So what it's going to do is isolate itself from that other trough, which was further to the north in here, and that's going to allow it to isolate. It's going to cut off, and then you're going to see again what's going to look very weird and awkward on this image, but it's going to kind of curve around like this. So this would be for Thursday of next week, cold into the Ohio Valley, and then you see it pushes all the way back up into Ontario after that. So whether this happens, we still don't know. This would be by Saturday of next week. And then you can see eventually that pushes away further to the east as still a fairly potent trough as we get into Sunday and Monday. So an interesting setup that we have here. And you can see it kind of just lingers there even through Monday, and it would probably stay there for probably another 1 or 2 days after that. Here's a look at the temperature anomalies. So on the surface, this is how far above or below normal the temperatures are going to be. You can see that in the northwest, we have some colder temperatures into there, so we're dealing with right around 10 to 15 degrees below normal. Again, that's where we have that snowstorm that we were talking about in the past couple of videos, especially into the northern Rockies. So those colder temperatures will enhance the amount of snowfall that is possible there. And then by Monday, that continues to spread further to the east. So now a good portion of the west and the central plains is dealing with colder temperatures. As we move this on to Tuesday, you can see that pretty much the entire central United States in the colder temperatures, very warm if you live up into Quebec. And then look at this, you have a very stark contrast in Canada where you cross this line, this arbitrary line, and you go from the warm side of this front to the cold side of this front. So we have in eastern Ontario probably 8 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. Western Quebec, Western Ontario, and you're looking at maybe 8 or 10 degrees below normal. So that's a 15 or 20 degree temperature difference in Fahrenheit over a relatively small area. And that's just going to go to show you how strong and powerful this trough is. It's going to start to isolate itself, and this is when that happens. So you can see we have that little column here of colder temperatures that's going to span a few hundred miles into the central United States, and also into central and eastern Canada. This would be by Wednesday. If we move on to Thursday, this is when it isolates itself. So now it's being cut off by that high pressure into eastern Canada, and that's allowing this low pressure to strengthen on to the south. So now you're dealing with temperatures that are going to be closer to 20 degrees below normal in areas like Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, and generally areas in the Ohio Valley, the Corn Belt, into the Tennessee Valley, where you're dealing with those really cold or relatively cold temperatures for those spots. If we move this on to Friday, you can see that in the eastern United States and dealing with those colder temperatures still, it then does that little thing where it shifts back to the north. And then after that, it moves further to the east again, and you'll see that on this next frame, where those colder temperatures gradually move on to the east, and it's fairly widespread at chilly temperatures as we get into the start of the next week. So not this week, but the start of next week, when we'll be dealing with the colder temperatures. Here to be by Sunday, the actual temperatures. So these are the actual low temperatures for each day, and you'll see that they start to get down into the 40s and the 50s, which is below normal for these areas, and it'll definitely give you a taste of fall, especially when you're going out to the bus stop in the morning, or when you're getting ready to go to work in the morning, and you have to go outside. You'll start to feel a little bit chillier. You may want to bring out a light jacket or sweater outside, because it will be a little bit on the chillier side, but it's not going to be anything too extreme overall. And during the day, it will start to warm up a little bit, but in the morning hours, it may still be a little bit chilly, probably up until 8 or 9 a.m. Then it'll probably start to warm up as you get more of that daytime heating. This would be by Monday. You can see that in the northwest, we're dealing with temperatures into the 30s, even a few 20s in the higher elevations. And that's where we're dealing with our snowstorm into those spots. It's going to be generally a 3 to 6 plus inch event over those areas. And if you want to know about that storm, go check out yesterday's video where I had my snowfall forecast for that event. This entire thing starts to push on further to the east as we get into Tuesday. So we're looking at, for a good portion of the western United States, we're dealing with temperatures that are going to be fairly chilly into the 40s and the 30s. Moving this on, you can see that the 40s start to shift off into the northern plains. So when you're kind of dealing with that shade of blue, that's where we're looking at about 45 or 40 degrees for the low temperature. So not freezing. We're not dealing with frost just to this point, but we could definitely see some temperatures that are going to be on a little bit of the colder side, and it'll definitely start to make the leaves turn a little bit more yellow or orange, considering that it has been quite warm the past couple of weeks. So a little bit of chilly air will definitely help to cool down the leaves, and it'll start to probably induce a little bit more color change within the leaves as well. Here to be by Thursday, you can see that trough is digging down into the eastern United States. By this point, it's in the Great Lakes where we have the cooler temperatures. So we're dealing with 40 degree temperatures, or a little bit higher, probably close to 45 degrees in those areas. This will be by Thursday. Here's for Friday. Not a lot has changed, except that the eastern extent of this is now almost all the way to the coast. So we're dealing with, even into areas like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, those low temperatures are getting down into the 50s, so relatively cold for those areas. And then further to the north, it's going to be up into the 40s. If we look at for Saturday, this is when that system goes back up into Canada for just one day, and then eventually it dives back into the eastern United States as we get to Sunday. And for Monday, and probably even into Tuesday and Wednesday, it would be relatively chilly for the eastern United States, where you have those temperatures getting down into the 40s for those spots. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you have any questions or comments, just leave a comment down below, and I'll be responding within just a few hours of you posting that. Hope everybody has a good day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.